In a quiet neighborhood, where gossip traveled faster than the wind, lived a girl named Amma. She was only 24, full of energy, dreams, and the kind of hope that made people believe the world could still be good. Amma had just moved into a small rented room at the edge of the street, where time seemed to move slower than everywhere else. The air always smelled of dust and old mango trees, and every evening neighbors would gather outside their homes, talking about everything and everyone. It didn't take long before they started talking about her too. Because one morning, Amma did something nobody could understand. She walked across the street, carrying a bowl of jollof rice and a smile straight to the old house everyone avoided. Inside that house lived a man most people had forgotten. His name was Mr. Kofi. 90 years old, frail, quiet, and bitter. People said he was once powerful a businessman, a man who owned half the land around that town. But now he lived alone. No wife, no children, no friends. Amma knocked gently. At first there was no answer, but she didn't leave. She waited. And when the door finally creaked open, a pair of tired eyes looked back at her. Suspicious, cautious, almost frightened. "Good morning, sir," Amma said softly. "I live across the street. I brought you breakfast." There was silence. Then a weak, shaky voice asked, "Who sent you?" Amma smiled. "No one. I just thought you might be hungry." The door didn't close, and that was the beginning. The first few days, the neighbors just watched curious. By the end of the week, they started whispering, and soon the whole street had something to say. She asks after his money. Maybe she wants to inherit the house. At her age, spending time with a 90-year-old? Every cruel word reached Amma's ears, but she never stopped visiting. Every morning she'd knock on that old door. Sometimes she'd bring food, sometimes just a story. Sometimes she'd help sweep the dusty floor while Mr. Kofi sat silently in his chair, pretending not to care. But deep down, something was changing in him. He started waiting for her. The same man who once cursed anyone who came near his gate now found himself looking at the clock, wondering when the soft knock would come again. And when it did, his old, wrinkled face softened. "Good morning, old soldier," Amma would tease, and he'd chuckle, a sound no one had heard from that house in decades. One afternoon, as rain began to fall, Amma noticed a picture frame on his dusty shelf. It was a photograph. A young man, a woman, and a little girl, no older than 5. She picked it up gently. "Your family?" she asked. Mr. Kofi froze. He turned away. "Put it down," he whispered. "I'm sorry," Amma said quickly. "I didn't mean to just put it down." The tone was sharp, but the sadness behind it was louder than his words. Amma placed the photo back carefully and said nothing more. But that night, while the rain beat against her window, she couldn't stop thinking about that picture. Who were they? Where were they now? And why did his eyes fill with so much pain? Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Every day, Amma kept visiting. Sometimes she'd bring groceries. Sometimes she'd sit and read the Bible to him. Other times, they'd simply sit in silence. 2 generations, 2 souls, bound by something neither could explain. But the gossip only grew. Why is she wasting her time with that old man? She must be planning something. She's too kind, that is suspicious. Amma ignored it all because in her heart, she knew the truth. This wasn't about pity. It wasn't about kindness. It was personal. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the world turned orange, Mr. Kofi looked at her and said quietly, "You remind me of someone I used to know." Amma smiled. "Who?" He looked at her for a long moment, then turned back toward the window. Someone I lost a long time ago." He said nothing more that day, but that night he dreamed for the first time in years. He dreamed of a little girl laughing, running barefoot in the garden calling his name. When he woke up, his pillow was wet with tears. Ama's visits became his lifeline. She'd fix him tea, help him shave, tell him stories about her childhood. He'd listen, sometimes smiling, sometimes lost in thought. One day he asked her, "Why do you keep coming here, Ama?" She looked down, hesitant. Then she smiled softly. "Because everyone deserves a friend, even when they think they done tea." That answer stayed with him. For days he replayed it over and over. Everyone deserves a friend, even when they think they don't tea. For the first time, he began to see how lonely he truly was, and how much light this young girl had brought into his fading world. But something else began to trouble him. Ama often stared at that old photograph. Every time he caught her looking at it, there was a strange sadness in her eyes, like the picture meant something more to her, something she couldn't have put into words. He wanted to ask, but fear held him back. At his age, memories were both a comfort and a curse. Some things, he believed, were better left buried in silence. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that this young woman, this stranger, who had walked into his life, was not a coincidence. One evening, Ama arrived later than usual. The sky had already turned gray. The wind was sharp, carrying the smell of rain and smoke. When she stepped through the gate, she saw him struggling with a broken chair in the yard. She rushed forward. "Old soldier," she said softly, "you will hurt yourself." He smiled faintly. Maybe that would give the neighbors something else to talk about. She laughed, and for a moment it felt like laughter could chase away the years between them. Ama helped him inside, set the chair right, and made tea. The house smelled of ginger and dust, and the soft crackle of the radio filled the silence. She looked at him carefully. His trembling hands, the deep lines across his face, the heavy sadness behind his smile. "You don't have to fix everything by yourself," she whispered. He looked at her surprised, almost defensive, then sighed. "I've been fixing things alone for 90 years. It's just too late to change that now." Ama shook her head. "It's never too late to let someone care." The words hit him deeper than she realized, because somewhere inside, he knew she wasn't just talking about fixing chairs. That night, after she left, he sat in his old armchair for hours, staring at the photograph again. His hands trembled as he traced the outline of the little girl's face in the picture. Her smile, it looked so much like Ama's. No, it couldn't be. It wasn't possible. Still, he couldn't sleep. The next morning, he waited at the window before sunrise, waiting for that knock, and when it came, he smiled, like a child hearing his mother's voice after a long silence. Ama brought him breakfast, as always. Bread, eggs, and his favorite cocoa drink. She noticed the open photo frame on the table. "I've seen this picture so many times," she said quietly. "You must miss them a lot." He nodded slowly. "They were my world once." His voice cracked. "But I made choices I can never undo." Ama looked down, her hands trembling slightly. Maybe forgiveness still finds us even when we think we don't deserve it. He looked at her sharply, almost searching her face for something. "Why do you say that?" Ama hesitated, then smiled, hiding whatever pain sat behind her eyes. "Because I believe people can change, no matter how late." Outside, two neighbors passed by, whispering loudly enough for both of them to hear. "See her? That's the girl who spends every day with that old man. She must be planning to marry him before he dies." The laughter stung the air. Ama pretended not to hear, but her chest tightened. She kept stirring his tea, forcing a smile. Mr. Kofi clenched his fists. He hadn't defended anyone in years, not since his pride built a wall around him. But now, something inside him burned. He stood slowly, his voice deep and steady. "People laugh when they don't understand kindness," he said, loud enough for the voices outside to stop. "Let them talk. They've forgotten what compassion looks like." Amma froze, watching him, the same man who once never spoke to anyone, now defending her. And in that small moment, something shifted. They weren't just two lonely souls anymore. They were beginning to heal each other. Later that evening, Amma helped him light the old lantern in his sitting room. The glow flickered across his face, making him look both fragile and timeless. She asked him to tell her a story, one from his younger days. He hesitated, then began to speak. He talked about how he once loved a woman so deeply it terrified him, how his pride drove her away, how he spent years chasing wealth, believing success could fill the emptiness she left behind. Amma listened quietly. Every word he spoke was heavy, almost too heavy to carry. When he finished, his eyes were glassy with tears. "I built a house so big, but it was never a home again." Amma reached out, resting her hand gently on his. "Maybe you're not done building yet," she whispered. "Maybe this time you can build something that lasts." He looked at her hand, on his young, steady warm, and for the first time in decades, he felt something he thought he'd lost forever: peace. That night, when Amma walked home, the sky was full of stars. She stopped halfway down the road and looked back at the old man's house. A soft light still glowed from his window, and she smiled through the tears gathering in her eyes, because she knew this was where she needed to be. Every visit, every meal, every quiet evening, it wasn't just kindness. It was purpose. And soon, very soon, he would understand why she had come into his life. But for now, she kept the secret in her heart. She'd wait for the right moment. The truth would come, not as a shock, but as a gift. As she closed her door that night, the neighbors whispered again. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that the same old man they mocked had once broken the heart of the very family she came from. They didn't know that Amma was there not to take his wealth, but to return something far more precious: forgiveness. And as the night deepened over the quiet town, two souls, one at the beginning of her life, the other near its end unknowingly, began to rewrite the story that had been left unfinished decades ago. What neither of them realized yet was that fate had brought them together for one final truth, a truth that would soon silence every whisper and change both of their lives forever. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Amma and Mr. Kofi deepened, like roots finding water in dry soil. The neighbors' laughter had faded, now replaced by silent curiosity. They still whispered when she passed, but something about the old man had changed. His garden was clean again. His porch no longer looked abandoned. And most evenings, people could hear gentle laughter, coming from that house laughter that had been missing for years. Amma brought life, where time had taken everything away. One Sunday afternoon, she arrived carrying a small box wrapped in brown paper. He looked up, confused. "What's this?" he asked. "A gift," she said softly. "Close your eyes." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You sound like my granddaughter." Her heart skipped, but she smiled, hiding the ache behind her eyes. When he opened the box, there was an old-style wristwatch inside polished silver, engraved with small letters. He held it up to the light, squinting. "It looks just like mine," he whispered. Then his eyes widened. No, it was his. He looked at her sharply. Where did you get this? Amma hesitated. I found it in the market, she lied softly. The seller said it came from an estate auction. He ran his fingers over the engraving, his late wife's initials, still visible after all those years. This watch. His voice trembled. I gave it to her before she left. He paused. Before I ruined everything. Amma lowered her eyes. She could feel her heart beating fast. It was too soon to tell him. Not yet. Later that day, as the wind rustled through the trees, he began to speak again, unprompted this time. Do you believe in fate, Amma? She looked at him quietly. I think fate brings people together for reasons we don't see until it is too late. He nodded slowly, his voice soft. Maybe what's happening now? He looked out the window, his gaze far away. You remind me of my daughter. She had your courage, your stubbornness, even your way of smiling when you're hiding something. Amma froze. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. He didn't notice. He just kept talking, lost in memory. She left me when she was 20, he continued. I was too proud, too harsh. I thought discipline would make her strong, but all it did was push her away. Amma's hands trembled. What happened to her? He took a deep breath. She married a man I didn't approve of. I said terrible things to her that day, words I can never take back. She left, and I never saw her again. He looked down, tears gathering in his eyes. I heard she died years later, but I never found out how. I didn't even try. The room fell silent. Amma's throat tightened, and she turned away, pretending to wipe something from the table. But the truth burned inside her, aching to come out. That woman was her mother. That night, Amma couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, holding the same photograph she'd secretly borrowed from his shelf, the one with the little girl, the young man, and the woman smiling beside him. Her mother looked so happy in that picture, so alive. Amma whispered to the night, I wish you could see him now, Mama. He's not the monster everyone said he was. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She remembered her mother's final days, how she used to talk about a man she could never forgive, and yet never stopped loving. A man named Kofi. Amma closed her eyes and promised silently, I'll finish what you started. I'll forgive him for both of us. The next morning she arrived early again. He was already awake, sitting on the porch, watching the sunrise. She joined him quietly. Neither spoke for a long while. The air smelled of dew and memories. Then he said softly, I used to sit here with my little granddaughter. She loved the sunrise, said it looked like the world was being born again. Amma turned to him, her eyes glistening. What was her name? He smiled faintly. Amma. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Yes, he continued, unaware of her shock. She was just a baby when her parents left. I never met her, but sometimes I imagine she'd be around your age now. Amma's heart pounded. He didn't know. He didn't realize she was that granddaughter. The world seemed to stand still. The morning light fell softly on his wrinkled face, full of regret, and yet strangely peaceful. Amma swallowed hard, forcing a shaky smile. That's a beautiful name, she whispered. He nodded. Yes. My daughter said it meant born on Saturday. She said it was a blessing. Amma's voice broke slightly. She was right. From that day on, she cared for him like family, though he didn't yet know how true that word was. She cleaned his room, cooked his meals, read him stories, and sometimes just sat beside him while he napped. Every day, she saw less of the proud, cold man she had heard about all her life, and more of the gentle soul her mother must have once loved. One evening, she found him trying to walk to the garden alone. He stumbled, and she rushed to catch him. He looked embarrassed. "I hate being this weak," he muttered. She smiled. "Strength isn't about walking without help. It's about letting someone walk beside you." He looked at her, really looked at her. Then he said quietly, "You talk just like my daughter used to." Amma forced a smile, though her eyes were wet. "I think maybe she taught me." He didn't understand what she meant not yet. The next few days his health began to decline. He tired easily, spoke less, and sometimes forgot where he was. Amma stayed by his side, watching over him like a guardian. The doctor said it was only a matter of time. Amma felt the truth pressing closer, both the truth she carried and the one life was about to take from her. She sat by his bed one night, holding his frail hand. His breathing was shallow. The lantern light flickered softly across the walls. He whispered, "Amma." She leaned closer. "Yes, I'm sorry for everything I've done." She squeezed his hand, tears falling freely now. "Shh. Rest. You've done enough." "No," he said weakly. "I've been waiting for forgiveness." Amma's voice shook. "You already have it." He smiled faintly, eyes half closed. "You remind me of the little girl I never met." Amma's heart broke. She wanted to tell him to say, "I'm right here." But fear held her back. Not yet. He wasn't strong enough to bear it. Not until the right moment. She sat there long into the night, whispering prayers her mother once taught her. Outside, the rain began to fall softly, like the sky was weeping with her. And deep down, she knew when the truth finally came out, it would change everything. The truth was no longer hiding, it was waiting. Waiting for the moment when love, pain, and forgiveness would finally collide, and the laughter of the neighbors would be replaced with silence. The rain had not stopped that night. It fell endlessly, like the heavens themselves refused to forget. Amma sat beside Mr. Kofi's bed, holding a cup of water in her hands, untouched. He slept restlessly, whispering fragments of his past in his dreams. Names, regrets, prayers. And every word felt like a knife slowly twisting inside her heart. She knew she couldn't wait much longer. The truth had to come out. Not for her sake, but for his. Because forgiveness only heals when it's spoken aloud. The next morning, the world felt still. Even the neighbors seemed quiet, as if the town could sense something sacred was about to happen. Amma sat by his bedside, reading softly from his old Bible. Her voice trembled on certain verses, the ones about grace, about second chances. And when she finished, she closed the book gently, looking at him with teary eyes. "Do you believe," she asked softly, "that God sends people back into our lives to fix what we broke?" He looked at her weakly, his eyes pale but kind. "I don't know," he whispered, "but if he does, I hope he forgives me before he sends them." Amma smiled through her tears. Maybe he already did. He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Amma took a deep breath. Her hands shook as she reached into her bag and pulled out the small photograph she had borrowed weeks ago, the one of the young man, the woman, and the little girl. She placed it on his lap. "You remember this picture?" she said softly. He looked down at it, confused. "Of course I do," he whispered. "That's my daughter, her husband, and my granddaughter." Amma's voice broke. "Yes," she said, "and that little girl." She paused, tears falling freely now. "Is me." The world seemed to stop. No sound, no movement, just silence. He stared at her, his trembling hands hovering over the photo. His lips parted, but no words came out. Then he looked closer, really looked at her. The same eyes, the same dimple when she tried not to cry, the same gentle kindness that her mother once had. It hit him like lightning. His chest rose sharply as he whispered, "No, it can be." Amma nodded slowly. "It is, Grandpa." His eyes filled instantly. His voice cracked like dry earth. "My God," he gasped. "My little Amma." She fell to her knees beside his bed, holding his shaking hand to her face. Tears spilled down both of their cheeks, one from regret, one from release. "I came because Mama wanted me to," she sobbed. "She used to talk about you every night, even when she was sick. She said she forgave you, even if you never asked for it." He covered his face with his hands, weeping like a child. "I don't deserve that kind of mercy," he whispered. "I hurt her. I drove her away." Amma shook her head. "No, you're still her father, and I am still your blood." He tried to speak again, but his voice broke. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Amma smiled faintly, brushing his tears with her fingers. "Because I wanted to meet you first, not as the man Mama left behind, but as the man she still believed you could be." He looked at her with trembling disbelief, and then he did something he hadn't done in 60 years. He reached out and hugged her, his frail arms wrapping around her, as though he were holding her mother again. They stayed like that for a long time, just breathing, crying, healing. Later that day, the neighbors saw Amma opening every window in the old man's house. For the first time in years, sunlight poured inside. She washed his clothes, made soup, and sat him outside to feel the warmth. He smiled like a child, rediscovering joy. Those who once whispered now watched silently from across the street, unsure of what had changed, only that something had. They saw kindness where they once saw suspicion. They saw family where they once saw foolishness. As the days passed, the bond between them grew stronger. He told her stories about her mother, things she had never known, how she loved to climb mango trees, how she sang when she cooked, how she dreamed of peace. And Amma shared stories about her own childhood, how her mother worked herself sick to give her an education, how she'd whispered her father's name in her sleep even years after leaving him. Every story filled the cracks time had left between them. Every memory rebuilt what pride had destroyed, and every evening, as the sun set, they'd sit side by side, holding hands, a 90-year-old man and his granddaughter, watching the world grow quiet together. But time is never patient, not even with those who've just begun to heal. One evening, as Amma read to him, his breathing slowed. He closed his eyes mid-sentence and whispered, "Donda, stop reading, I like your voice." She smiled sadly. "I'll keep reading, Grandpa." He nodded faintly. "If I sleep, promise me you'll forgive me one last time." Amma's tears fell onto his hand. "I already have." He smiled, peaceful, serene. Then his hand went still. The lantern flickered softly, and in that golden light he looked as if he were only sleeping, but Amma knew. She placed her head on his chest and cried quietly, not out of anger, not even grief, but love, because at last the man her mother once wept for had found peace. The next morning the town woke to whispers again, but this time it wasn't laughter. It was awe. Neighbors stood outside the old man's house as they watched Amma, dressed in white, sitting by his portrait. The once abandoned home was filled with flowers and soft music. The girl they mocked now carried herself like someone who had seen heaven and come back whole. They whispered, "She wasn't after his money. She was his blood. She gave him peace before he died, and for the first time there was silence where judgment used to be." Amma stayed in that house after the funeral. She didn't sell it. She turned it into a small orphanage, just like her mother had once dreamed of. On the gate, she hung a simple wooden sign. It read, home of second chances. And beneath it, in smaller letters, a quote her grandfather once said, "People laugh when they don't understand kindness." Every time she looked at that sign, she smiled not with sorrow, but peace. Because now, every child who walked through that gate was a reminder that love heals everything time tries to break. And so, when the neighbors remembered the girl they once laughed at, they no longer spoke with mockery. They spoke with tears in their eyes because now they knew the truth, that sometimes a 24-year-old girl can teach the world more about love and forgiveness. Weeks turned into months. And though the house, once filled with silence, now echoed with laughter, a part of Amma still felt his presence everywhere. Sometimes she would catch herself setting an extra bowl at the table. Sometimes she'd hear the floor creak and look toward the chair he used to sit in. But instead of sadness, she smiled. Because love doesn't disappear when someone dies. It just changes form. It lingers in the walls, in the air, in the lives they've touched. Every evening, when the children finished their homework, Amma gathered them in the courtyard. Under the same mango tree her grandfather once planted, she'd tell them stories. Not fairy tales, but truths disguised as tales. She told them about a young woman who forgave when she had every reason to hate. About a lonely old man who found redemption in the arms of the granddaughter he never knew. And about how love, the real kind, never asks what you have, but who you are inside. The children listened quietly, their eyes wide, their hearts soft, because even they could feel the power in her words. One evening, a man from the town came by. He was one of the neighbors who used to gossip the loudest. Now, he stood at the gate, holding a small bag of rice. "Amma," he said, awkwardly clearing his throat, "I brought this for the children." Amma smiled warmly. "You don't have to." "I know," he said softly, "but I want to." He looked around the courtyard, at the children laughing, the clean walls, the flowers growing by the fence, and then he said something that made her eyes well up again. "You were right, Amma. Kindness doesn't need explaining." From that day forward, the house became a symbol in the community. People began visiting not out of curiosity, but out of love. They brought food, books, and clothes for the children. And soon, what once was just one girl's act of forgiveness became a movement of compassion that spread through the entire town. Amma didn't call herself a hero. She didn't want fame or credit. She simply wanted to keep one promise, the one she made beside her grandfather's bed. To live with the same love her mother had shown. And she did. Years passed. The children she raised grew up. Some became teachers, others doctors. Some even started homes of their own. But they never forgot her lessons. Whenever they faced hardship, they remembered her voice saying, "People might laugh when you choose love, but that's only because they haven't learned what love truly costs and what it gives back." One quiet afternoon, Amma sat in the garden, her hair now streaked with gray. A little boy ran up to her, one of the new orphans. He held a paper flower he'd made in class. "For you," he said shyly. Amma smiled and took it gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's a beautiful." The boy tilted his head. "Grandma Amma, why do you always smile when you look at the sky?" She looked up, eyes glistening under the golden sun. "Because someone I love is up there," she said softly, "and every sunset feels like he's smiling back." The boy thought for a moment, then asked, "Do you miss him?" Amma smiled again, that quiet, knowing smile. "Missing someone," she said, "means they mattered. And that's the truth about love, isn't it?" It's not always about who stays. Sometimes it's about who teaches us how to stay kind even when the world laughs. Ama's story wasn't about a young girl and an old man. It was about grace, about what happens when we choose understanding over judgment and compassion over pride. Because forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It frees you. It turns pain into peace and enemies into family. And long after the laughter fades, the story remains. Somewhere, a lonely soul will remember Ama's courage. Someone broken will find the strength to forgive. Someone mocked will remember that love always has the final word. And when that happens, the world becomes a little softer, a little kinder, a little more like home. So the next time the world laughs at your kindness, the next time people call you foolish for caring too much, just remember Ama's story. Because when the truth finally comes out, it's not the laughter they'll remember. It's the love.